In our previous video, we saw how to create our index.html page and get it rendering to the screen. We also then created our about.html page, but as of yet, we haven't got that linked up. We are going to look at how to do that in this video now. To achieve it, we need to do something called rooting. You've already been introduced to rooting in Flask because we used this decorator here and the /. So when we go to the / on our top level of our domain, it then returns the template from our index function. The root decorator binds the index function to itself, so that whenever that root is called, the function is called. This function is also called a view. Let's create another root and another view. We are going to use the decorator at app.root, but this time the path is going to be / about. We will bind that to a view that we'll also call about. Finally, we will just return render template about.html. In order for our navigation links to work, we need to use the Jinja templating method of URL_for in order to call the appropriate functions. The format for that is double curly brackets, opening and closing, URL_for, and then the name of our function goes inside of single quotes wrapped inside of parentheses. I will copy that URL pattern, then paste it into the href for our About page. Then update the function name to match our About function from Python. When Flask sees these two opening curly brackets, it knows that what's actually inside of there will be some code. What we're doing is calling the URL_for function that looks up the view called index or the view called about and then injects some text, which is the actual root. The names have to correspond to the views, so for now that means our index view and our about view. We need to be sure to update that on both pages, so I will copy those two lines from index and paste them into my about file. After saving both of those files, then refresh my preview page. If I click on About, then my About page is rendered. We can see that /about is in our URL path on the page. If I click on Home, I go back to the home page, and it's just the standard top level page since we only have an empty /. Flask is looking up our index and about views and injecting the URL for each into their respective href. Let's make another link, so I'll duplicate the last list item. This time, we're going to have a contact page, so it needs to look up the URL for contact. I'll just copy that line and paste it into the index.html page as well, so that my navigation bar is the same between all files. Then I can right-click on my about.html page, duplicate it, and change its name to contact.html. I'll just edit the contact.html page and change the words from About Page to Contact Us. Obviously, this link will not work just yet because we need to create a root and a view for contact. Make sure that two blank lines separate each function to keep it PEP 8 compliant. Create a new app.root decorator, and this time our URL is going to be /contact. As for the view, we've already called it contact in our URL_for. Finally, that's going to return the contact.html template. When I save that and go back to the preview page and refresh, I can see that I have all three link items now. Clicking on the contact link will now take me to my Contact Us template. Sometimes though, when we're creating these URLs, we may get the name wrong. For instance, if I were looking for the URL for home here instead of the URL for index, obviously my home view does not exist in Python, and Flask will notify me of that error. If I go back and refresh the home page, I get an error. That error reads, "Could not build URL for endpoint home. Did you mean about instead?" Flask is really great for helping us to identify where the error might be coming from, so be sure to look over these lines carefully to identify the error. Generally, the error can be found roughly halfway down this page. just look for something that looks most like your own actual code. In this case, my error seems to be coming from my index.html page on line 13 of that file. This particular error means that the page tried to find an endpoint or path to index, but I've written home, so it's not able to load the page properly. Let's just change that back to index on line 13 and check to see if the page loads correctly now. We now have 3 templates, 3 roots, and we've also used some very basic Jinja templating. This is all very useful, but it would be even more useful if we only had to create our navbar once so that every time we add a new page, we didn't have to replicate those changes across each of our templates. We can do this, and that is called template inheritance. We are going to have a look at how to implement that into this project on the next video.